that I can have a recorded version and go live on Facebook at the same exact time. So for any of you who are watching this live and you're like, wait a minute, I know someone that would really, really love this. So don't worry. We got it going on. We have it recorded. We have it everywhere. And you know there's going to be people that really want to see this. So we're live, we're recording, we're doing both. And I got Candy in the house. But before I bring her on, let me tell you a little bit about her. Dr. Candy Campbell is an award-winning actor, author, filmmaker, and nurse. Are you in for a treat? She co-founded an improv, I think she'll be great with interviewing, and stand-up comedy group in the San Francisco Bay Area in the early 90s, which led to designing applied, I love this, experimental learning courses for the Silicon Valley businesses starting in 1995. Since then, she has taught this method of advanced communication techniques using applied improvisation principles, completed doctoral work on the topic, and written, which that's how I met her, 2 of her 6 books on the subject. Welcome, Candy. How are you?
I'm doing well. It's great to see you again.
I know, we were just figuring it out, guys. We met at the Pyramid Club because of Teresa. Shout out to Teresa Humble, right? Is that how we met?
Yeah.
And which book were you talking about then?
That was because Improv to Improve Your Leadership team had been, what do they call it? Dropped. Yes.
Let's go with that. They call it drop. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have to tell you, I want to say your opening line, but of all the years I've been doing this, I think this is one of the most intriguing improv nursing. It's like, wow. All right. But anyhow, when I asked Candy her one line that she wanted to tell women and men around the world, she said, I learned early on in my career as a nurse, life is short. So if you lose sleep wondering, why doesn't anybody do something about X, Y, Z? Maybe that somebody should be you. Now, I don't know, Kenny, you look like a person of action. Have you ever said that? Why hasn't anybody done X, Y, Z? Because you seem like somebody that just goes, that's it. Needs to be done. I'm doing it.
It is the story of all of the things, all of the projects, all of the creative things, the books, the film, the shows. Yeah, it's they all start with, it seems, with either somebody saying something to me that got me thinking, or me just about, you know, how it feels when you've had a full day and you're doing, you know, all of what you need to do to put a roof over your head and everything else. And you're winding down, and you just, you know, have my time of prayer at that time and say, well, Lord, you know, another day above ground. And so here we are, and thank you for this day. And then sometimes, maybe because that's when I'm quiet, it's almost like a tap on the shoulder. What about that XYZ thing that was bothering you? Ah, yeah, somebody ought to do something about that. And the why not you has come over me. It's like, oh no. And me arguing. Oh, I could tell you there are stories for every one of my projects. Oh no, I just don't have time to do that. I can't do that.
Yeah.
It happens. Just say yes. Say yes and.
Wait, isn't that heroic public speaking? It's a keynote course, Amy Michael Porter, everything was say yes and, like say yes and. You know, I was reading that as one of your tips when you said about we can make the world a more inclusive place and share a sense of belonging by adopting the yes and mindset. Tell me more, because I have stickies around my room saying, you can say no, Sandy. Just say no, because I take on too much. So I'm curious about this and your meaning.
Okay. Well, you know, after I took a first degree in theater and acting, and then realized that that's a really tough row to hoe for a young, especially a young woman, and then had, you know, some time where I tried to figure things out. And then I got, as we say in the biz, the call to be a nurse. Um, it was quite a while before I got back into acting and improv. Uh, so what happened is that initially went through a difficult life experience, and I just felt I needed to laugh again. So I enrolled in an improv, well, a stand-up comedy class, and everybody was doing improv too. So okay, I did that too. And I thought that I would understand all about it because after all, I already had a degree in acting. But there's a difference because when you're on stage as somebody else, then you already have scripted lines and everything. But when you're doing stand up or you're doing improv, you're essentially there's no hiding, right? And then talking about the yes and part, my professional training and I think everybody can relate to this. No matter what you do, you're accountable to someone, you're responsible for certain things, and it seems like the longer you live, the more you're responsible for, especially if you're a parent.
Yeah.
And we are trained, our logical reasoning tells us to avoid risk, to mitigate risk by saying no, but, or yes, but, and either one,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
as a nurse, if we don't, we check things with each other all the time. We have a system of checks and balances,
Yeah.
especially when it comes to medication, because if we screw up, somebody could die, right? So we say yes, but, or no, but all the time. So this was not a natural, like you just mentioned, you got
Yeah.
all this, you can, you can say no. This was a new thing. And one thing we have to determine here is that when we're doing training to release our creativity and connect with ourselves and with other people, because it's really about relationship building, we have to do it in a safe place. And so, first of all, we we promise that we're going to be kind to each other during it's kind of like going to the gym. You go into the gym, and even if you have a trainer, they'll say, okay, well, I'm going to spot you, you're going to be careful, you don't want to hurt yourself, and so forth and so on. And it's the same way when we come together to learn how to do these improvisational principles that are guided with exercises and games that we play. But we all have to come together at first and say, okay, I'm willing to maybe look a little silly or, loose-faced and somewhat, even make mistakes in order to learn what it is that this training is all about. And when we get, after we make it a safe place in that way, then we say, okay, one of the very first principles is saying yes. And just like you did,
Yeah.
everybody always pushes back against that. Is how can I do that? And we say, well, because right now, in this particular room, in this particular place in time, there's no reason for you not to say yes, just as an exercise,
Gotcha.
because
Gotcha.
nobody's going to die here. Hopefully. There's not going to be any harm coming to anyone here. We're just
I'm
exercising.
safe. Yeah. Yeah.
It's just play. We're just
Right.
playing,
Right.
you know. So what's the interesting thing is the way, if you want to talk about the neuroscience about how this works, is that when the cognitive behavioralists study how people, humans, learn,
Mhm.
children are the ones we study, right? Because
Right.
years 1 to 5, we got to learn so much. And what we find is that, and we've seen this in adult learning research too, if you sit a person down and lecture to them or just talk, even if there's some engaging stories, it usually sort of goes over your head, and maybe retention is 10 or 20% within a day or two. But it's not the best way that we actually inculcate learning and change behaviors, which is usually why businesses would call for somebody to help them, right?
Mm.
And so when we practice, uh, we call it accepting whatever somebody says, like say something to me right now that's just some random sentence, and I'll give you an example.
Today, I learned so much from my high-risk high school students that my mind was blown.
I love, and I would say yes, and I loved being a high school student, blowing my teacher's mind. I might say that, or I might say something else, but I would say yes. And this comes to another point, which is it would be impossible for me to say yes and add something, which I did,
Mm-hmm.
if I wasn't looking at you and listening to you really closely.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So that's the active listening that we don't just preach about,
Yeah.
we do it. They work together.
So I'm curious because I was teaching high school kids and I love them. I learned so much from them, but they really make you be on your A game of how to engage them. And I can tell when they're in it, and I can tell when they're like, phew. But I was thinking today, I never did anything. I've done a lot of different things with them, but maybe it would be neat to do an improv class with them. They might really enjoy that. And I was thinking that when I was reviewing your information.
Well, I'll tell you, as a person who's also, I taught K through 8 or K through 12, actually, at different times. And of course, I taught in the Graduate School of Nursing. Um, you have to be careful because in a classroom, it's not necessarily a safe place for everybody.
Ooh.
And I learned this the hard way because one time in a classroom, I thought, well, I have a great game. It'll be an icebreaker and it'll be so much fun. And
Yeah.
oh my gosh, because I had forgotten that in a classroom, it's not spoken, but it's understood. They're all there for a grade. And they are afraid of looking silly or making a mistake. Well, that's the that's the
That's
baseline
a
what you
very good, you're right.
so it does
You're
not
right.
work all the time if you
Yeah.
don't prepare and have the groundwork. So if you were to say, okay, this is, a retreat or a workshop or something that's not in the class where it has
Mhm.
nothing to do with a grade, it has nothing to do with you being the
Correct.
leader. Yeah, we have to be sort of equal in that space in order for it to work.
I have a friend, and she actually has a question here for you, but I know what you're going to say is she was considering doing Toastmasters. I'm not sure everybody
Mhm,
else out there
mhm.
knows about Toastmasters, so you can
Right.
talk about it. But
It's not a cooking class.
yeah, the reason she wanted to do it, you ready? Dear Candy, I think I need an improv class, maybe something like Toastmasters. It's not because I feel, oh my, I was cracking up so hard. It's not anything to do with business or getting up on stage. I just never know in the moment how to say the right thing to my in-laws.
Oh, okay. Right. No, I think that's
Cracking up.
perfectly valid, perfectly valid. And I will tell you the reason I say that is because the very first time that I created a course, an applied improv course for a business um, in 1995, as you mentioned, um, it was the first, I mean, I have a minor in education, so I knew how to develop a curriculum, but I had to recall, and it became very clear when I first went into what became a classroom with less than a dozen, actually, they were all fellas who were in supervisory positions. They were all like this. because they were being made to be there. And I realized, oh, this is really different than the classes that I've taken as an actor or performer,
Yeah.
where we were trying to learn comedy, because then everybody wants to be there and we want to have fun and we want to play and we want to find the funny just
Yeah.
because heck not, why not? It's just
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah.
But this was during a work day and they had other things that were so much more important to do. And they did not want to play. It sounded stupid. And these were IT engineers. They certainly did not want to get up in front of a room and do anything like that. So, of course, we had to, again, lay the ground, make it all safe for everybody. And at the end of the day, scrolling ahead, we had, I remember these two fellas in the room. One of the first exercises I did was reassuring everybody that I wasn't going to embarrass anybody or make anybody do anything that they
Yeah.
were uncomfortable doing. That was, forget that. But that I would like them to find a partner in the room of somebody they either didn't know at all, didn't know very well, or disliked. And so everybody pairs up, and then there's these two guys. They're like staring at each other
Oh
across the
God.
room. They're like, okay. At the end of the day, these were the two guys who were like,
Yeah. Yeah.
because I had been brought in, by the way. The fellow who asked us to come said, could you come and teach my really smart engineers how to play nice and park their egos and get some work done? They just can't get along. They argue about everything. So anyway, here's the example. These two guys who were evidently like two bulls locking horns. They do this silly exercise thing. And at the end of the day, one and then the other come over and say to me, I never imagined that I would walk out of here with a new friend of that guy. And I think this is going to help my marriage.
Wow.
So to the questioner,
Yeah. Sally, we'll call her Sally Bell.
Sally, yeah, I think it's a wonderful reason. I mean, any reason is a good reason to take improv class, I think. Because you when I teach when I do mentoring, coaching, or masterminds with speakers, one of the first things, and I'm often a judge in Toastmasters competition, so I'm very familiar with a wonderful organization that it is. One of the most difficult things for speakers or people who are facilitators, trainers, or whoever is when they're asked to extemporaneously answer questions because they're afraid they're going to look stupid, or somebody's going to ask them something that they don't know, and then, oh, what will they do? Or they'll forget a word, and oh my goodness, and on and on and on it goes.
Yeah.
So the improv principles and the improv training is just such a great way to release that fear. Just be yourself and understand that if you're in the front of the room, generally speaking, it's even if it's in your kitchen with your in-laws, there's a certain amount of panache that you have because of who you are and what you're doing.
So I'm going to go to the next question because you just brought it up. One of the listeners said her friend recommended improv to her because it would help her with her friendships in her marriage. And she's like, what does improv have to do with my marriage? And we're going to ask that question now.
Yeah.
From Betty Boop, because you just said, the guy said it's going to help my marriage. So you need to go more.
It's really a lot about listening. And maybe your listeners are familiar with a program that is called Marriage Encounter. There's different versions of that. And they do an exercise called the 10 and 10, which is where you sit across from each other and just look into each other's eyes. And I think you have to hold the gaze for a couple of minutes or something and
Ooh.
whatever. But it's one of the habits that we in our modern society sometimes we're getting away from. We're looking at our phones, we're looking at screens, but we don't always take the time to look at the person. And this really is about listening. And golly, if you've been married, you're both when you're dating, it seems like, oh, this is great. We can spend time together and oh, it'll be so great. When you're dating, you are concentrating on each other. But when you're living life, it's like, okay, I'll see you. I mean,
Yep, yep.
there's hardly any time, and you have to really grab some time and to sit down and look into anybody else's eyes. That's one principle. Another principle, we have a saying in improv that words are golden.
Mm.
That if you're able to see and speak, we don't want to take anything for granted here. You're in the presence of somebody else. As a nurse, I'm well aware that we are all one breath from eternity. So we don't like to take advantage or think that we're entitled to another day. You're there in time. Someone, whether it's your child or your partner, is looking at you saying something, stop. You can turn off the boiling water or whatever it is for a minute, stop. Look at them. Try and do your best. We work on, there are a lot of exercises about learning to read nonverbal signs
Yeah.
of what are you seeing when
Mm.
somebody's looking at you? What's their body position and what are they telling you? You know,
Yeah. You
and
know what?
listening.
I think it's way more difficult than it was. Think about it 20 years ago, because it is so tempting for people to look at their phones. It's so tempting. I was with a group of people and then they told me it was woo woo. I was like, guys, you got to put your phone down while we're here at the restaurant. And they're like, what are you talking about? Sandy, like, why are you getting all spiritual on us? I'm like, spiritual?
Isn't it funny? Because before 2007, we didn't have those instruments of distraction. And when you went out to a meal with somebody, you knew there wasn't going to be a telephone ringing. There was, unless you're, I don't know, the president or something, there's not going to be anybody interrupting your meal. You're going to sit down like we used to do as families a long time ago. And there wouldn't be a TV. There might be some nice music. There wouldn't be any distraction. You could relax, have your meal, and concentrate on that person. And listen. And after you listen and read their body language,
Mm.
do your best to say yes and continue the thought. And that has a lot to do with honoring another person for who they are, where they are at that moment. No matter how big that little person might be.
Do you think that, believe me, it's all day long I'm saying this. Like, do I have your eyes? Do you think it's really difficult for some people to do that?
Huh.
Like, they are wanting to listen. Like, I'm thinking of a few people in mind that unfortunately that the phone is like a crutch. And if they don't have doing it, they're nervous. Like, they don't even know how to relax and look in your eyes. And they're not meaning to be rude, because I've seen, and these are adults, tell them to put their phone down and they're looking at you and they look a nervous wreck.
Yeah, like they might miss something,
I don't know if
right?
it's that or they're just uncomfortable looking you in the eyes. And these are professional people.
Well, yes, and I will say that, there's some interesting research that's come out in the last few years, especially since COVID, about what it means neurologically when somebody likes something. It's like an addiction. It's like you get a hit of
Yeah, yeah.
serotonin Right. And so we're like a baby with a 2-year-old with a pacifier. You know, they don't need it,
I
but
got,
they want it.
yeah.
Yeah. So, and then the social consciousness of the time, you know, we've sort of been brainwashed into this. And those of us who were around before phones can understand this. But oh my goodness, the sheer magnitude of the amount of information and such that's just pouring out of these phones at us all the time. That is why I think there has been a lot of research about improv that's come up as a reaction to, since 2007, I will say, well, even no, a lot later than that, um, a lot of reaction to what are we going to do to stem the tide of our vanishing uh, time interest span? You know, what are we going to do?
Hmm.
I don't know. More action movies is not going to change it. I think it's getting back to basics. And oh, don't we sound like old grannies?
I was thinking the other day, I go to a ton of networking events, and somebody was like, "Oh my God, did you hang out with Sandy? She's so fascinating. She's so interesting." And Candy, I swear to you, I said 4 words. What I was fascinating about is I was listening to them. I swear that's it. Because I did an experiment, not on purpose. I'm like, I swear, and I can talk forever, but I also love listening. I love listening to people. I find humans fascinating. So I'm not just doing it, like I can't wait to hear what they have to say. So went to the next event and I did the same thing. And I'm thinking, I think they're not used to people really listening to them because I'm not even, my fascinating part is I'm not talking.
Isn't that funny? You know, that reminds me of, there was a movie a long time ago with Peter Sellers where he was, oh, golly, I can't remember the name of the movie, but you remember he somehow gets elected president or something
Yeah,
like
yeah,
that.
yeah. Oh, yeah, I remember that movie.
He was a gardener. Do you remember that? And he was
Oh
like,
my God, yes, yes. But but I don't know the name of the movie, but I remember the movie.
well, he was very socially awkward. And he searched for words so hard and so long that people thought, and he would stare at people and listen, but it would just, you know, it was like the machinations of his brain were so delayed that he took such a long time to say anything. People were like, he's so deep. And it was like, in the garden, one must wait for the seed to sprout, you know, whatever. I don't know. So I think you were doing
Oh
that.
my
You were
God.
honoring their presence by listening and asking questions to draw people out.
Which I love doing.
I do too.
My God. I gotta write down that movie because I'm definitely gonna look it up again and watch it.
Golly, I wish I could remember the name of it.
Oh,
Oh well. I
Katie,
mean,
I
if you
can't
look,
believe it. It's almost 3:30. So
ah,
let's just get this in a little bit more. I love all this. Tell us about, for those who can see, your show. Because we were talking about that. And I see the pictures behind us for those who can see, but tell them a little about it.
oh, there's a lot of pictures behind me, but the one in the top center is me as Florence Nightingale. So that's my third solo show. We were off Broadway last year, and we've been in 7 states and 3 countries, and we're touring again. In a couple of weeks, I'll be in La Crosse, Wisconsin at Viterbo University. It's a free performance Friday
Ooh.
night, the 16th of February, for anybody who wants to come. It's one of those public, what are they, feel good things that the university puts on for,
Oh,
because
that's cool.
it's oh no, it's not March. That's right. It's not Women's History Month yet, but I think they stuck it in there thinking because she's a feminist and all of that, that it would be great to have her at their college campus in a free event for the whole community. So
How
anyway.
long's the show? How long's the show?
Well, solo shows typically don't have an intermission, and this one does not either. I go, depending, I'll do it for the kiddos. We got, 3 through 8th grade or something coming in, and we'll do 60 minutes for them, or maybe it's 50. And then the adult show, it's not really it's a clean show. It's not like anything else happens
Yeah.
in the adult show. That
Thanks for clarifying, Candy.
yeah. That's 60 to 90 minutes, at least 75. And I will tell you the difference is because there is a Q&A built into every show, and it depends upon very
Ah.
often the adults have more questions, and so then it goes the full hour and a half.
So you live in DC now. Do you ever do any shows? And I'm in Philadelphia area. Do you ever do any shows locally?
Our friend T and I were just talking about that. Yeah, I would love to. I would love to. You have more than one school of nursing, one university there, and I've reached out and, so far it's crickets. So I don't know. We're talking about the Pyramid Club. I've got to follow up with her on that. Yes, I would love to.
Yeah, that would be
I
fun.
love Philly.
I love
Great
Philly.
town.
Yeah, I love DC too. Okay, I got to get this one in. So this is a couple that have gone to improv shows, and they want to know, are there any improv shows like they've seen on television where the audience participates?
Yes, and let me first say that the ones that you see on television are highly produced. I've been in the audience and I have had friends who've been on the most popular one. And you get in there, they lock you in for like 4 hours. It's really something. But
Oh,
because they're beholden to their sponsors, their advertisers, they only want the funniest bits. So that said, when you are seeking out an improv show that's live, and depending upon where you are, there's usually at least one place that'll have a live show. They always take suggestions from the audience. That's part of the beauty of improv. That's how we prove to you that we're not using some plant, it's not sketch comedy, because the audience is the impetus for whatever happens on stage, or at least the beginning. And
yeah,
so you also then will see possibly some scenes that may be not so hilarious, some that might be poignant, that will bring you to tears, some that are just, nah, that was okay. Next, let's try another one, because it's live.
I was thinking the closest thing I can remember going to, and I forget, it's what wedding was it? The Broadway show, Tina and somebody's wedding.
Yeah, I remember
And
that show.
it really was like I was at a wedding. I mean, I remember.
Yeah, but that was pretty scripted.
No, but
There's a lot of
afterwards,
Well,
after
it
it
was
was scripted.
extemporaneous,
Yeah.
but the agenda of what happened, believe me, it was scripted.
And
But
they
that's
made you
not the way it
feel
is.
like it was, oh,
No,
yeah.
yeah. That's why you felt you knew, because weddings are pretty scripted, but they had, certain things that they did, certain times they
Yes,
knew.
I got you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, Candy. Well, this has been, I knew I was going to enjoy your company. I knew it. I knew it. I knew it. I knew it.
Oh, you're a fun person, Sandy.
I love this. I love what you're doing. So before we go though, how can they find you? How can they reach you? How can they buy your books? We need everything.
Okay. There's two websites, one for improv, and that is my name, candycampbell.com. And if your listeners would like to have the front matter and the first chapter of Improv to Improve Your Leadership Team, Tear Down Walls and Build Bridges, all they have to do is fill out the contact form there, and I'll send that to them. And then the other one, the presenter's website, or the acting one, is the Florence Nightingale one. And that is called Florence Nightingale Live, live.com. And in both websites, there's videos and testimonials. They can go and poke around, see what's what. And of course, I have a YouTube channel, Candy Campbell RN.
Oh, I like that. All right. Well, hey, I got something to say, people. Like I said at the beginning, don't worry if you didn't catch it live. When we're done here, it's recorded. And my guy's going to put it on every single platform. So watch it where you'd like. And Candy and I would really appreciate you sharing and rating it. It really does make a difference. And Candy, once we're done here, I'm going to call you just so I can go through a little details and catch up. And peeps, you know what I'm going to say. Until next time. Toodles. Bye, Candy.
Bye.
Oh, it worked. Yay. Bye, Candy.
Bye.